The room was silent except for the faint ticking of the old clock on the wall. I sat there, staring at the empty chair across from me, the one where my son used to sit when we'd share dinner together. My hands trembled as I held the envelope that used to contain my entire life savings. Savings I had worked decades to earn. And now, it was gone. I had given it all to him. My son, my pride and joy, my reason for waking up every single morning. He said he needed help, said this was his big chance to finally make something of himself. And I believed him. Why wouldn't I? I was his father. But the day after he walked out with that money, he never came back. The calls stopped. The texts stopped. It was like I didn't exist. At first, I told myself he was just busy. Then I started to wonder if something had happened to him. But as the days turned into weeks, the truth hit me like a brick to the chest. My son had abandoned me. I was left with nothing but an empty house, an empty wallet, and a heart full of questions. Most people would have given up right there, accepted that life was over. But not me, because what my son didn't know was that I had one last move to play, one last trick up my sleeve, and by the time I was done, he would learn a lesson he'd never forget. My name is James, and for most of my life, I lived simply, some might even say quietly. I grew up in a small town where people still waved at each other when they passed by, where neighbors knew your name and your business, and where a man's word was worth more than a contract. I wasn't born into wealth. My father worked in the mills until the day his body couldn't take it anymore, and my mother held 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. From them, I learned the value of hard work, the pride of earning every penny, and the importance of family. By the time I was old enough to strike out on my own, I carried those lessons with me like a second skin. I spent decades working with my hands. I built houses, fixed fences, laid bricks, and poured concrete. The kind of work that leaves your back aching and your hands calloused. But when you look at what you built, you feel a satisfaction that no paycheck can buy. I never lived lavishly. My house was small, but solid, the kind you could raise a family in. I drove an old pickup that rattled in the winter and kept a small vegetable garden out back to save money on groceries. But I was happy. Every dollar I saved wasn't for vacations or fancy cars. It was for the future, for security, and most importantly, for my son, Lucas. When Lucas was born, everything changed. I remember holding him in my arms for the first time, this tiny, fragile life looking up at me. I promised myself then that I would give him a better life than the one I had. No matter what it cost me, no matter what sacrifices I had to make, I would make sure he never went hungry, never felt unwanted, never had to work as hard as I did just to survive. Raising Lucas became my life's mission. When he was little, I'd get up before dawn, make him breakfast, and head to work while he was still rubbing sleep from his eyes. I missed out on a lot of things, school plays, parent-teacher meetings, because I was always working overtime to keep the lights on. But when I did get home, I'd sit with him, help him with his homework, listen to him talk about his day. Weekends were sacred. I'd take him fishing down at the creek, teach him how to ride his bike, show him how to hammer and nail straight. I wanted him to grow up knowing that hard work wasn't a punishment. It was a way to build something lasting. The house we lived in was modest but full of life. The kitchen smelled like coffee and toast every morning, and the living room was littered with Lucas's toys, books, and school projects. At night, I'd sit in my old recliner, listen to the radio, and watch him doze off on the couch, feeling like maybe, just maybe, I was doing something right. But even in those good years, there was always a shadow in the back of my mind. What would happen when I got old? When I couldn't work anymore? That's why I saved every penny I could. No fancy dinners, no new gadgets, no big vacations. Every spare dollar went into a savings account, and every month I'd smile to myself as I watched that number slowly grow. That money wasn't just cash. It was my safety net, my retirement plan, my insurance that Lucas would never have to worry about taking care of me when I couldn't take care of myself. Life wasn't perfect, of course. There were arguments, the usual father-son clashes. Lucas wanted the latest sneakers, the newest phone, more freedom than I thought he was ready for. And sometimes I said no. Not because I didn't love him, but because I wanted him to understand that things had value, that money was earned, not handed out. When he went off to college, I cried the first night the house was empty. It was too quiet. No slammed doors, no music blaring from his room, no clatter of cereal bowls in the morning. But I was proud. Proud that he'd made it. Proud that my sacrifices had paid off. I thought we had built a bond that couldn't be broken. I thought he understood everything I had done for him. I thought he respected me. I had no way of knowing that my biggest heartbreak was just around the corner. It started with a phone call late one night. I was sitting at the kitchen table, bills spread out in front of me, trying to figure out how to stretch my retirement savings through the next year. The phone rang, and when I saw Lucas's name light up on the screen, my heart lifted. "Dad," he said, his voice strangely urgent. "I need to talk to you." Within an hour, he was standing in my living room, pacing back and forth. He looked different, sharper, almost harder. He wore expensive shoes, a watch that probably cost more than my truck, and he kept checking his phone while he talked. He told me he had a big opportunity. Some friends of his were starting a business, and they needed investors fast. He said this was his chance to make it big, to finally live the life he deserved. I asked questions, of course. What was the business? Who were these friends? What guarantee did he have that this would work out? But every time I asked, Lucas brushed me off with a smile. "Dad, you've been saving your whole life. You always told me you were doing it for me, for the future. Well, this is the future. This is my shot. I just need you to trust me." Trust. That word hung in the air like a weight. I had trusted him his whole life, trusted him to do the right thing, trusted him to make me proud. How could I say no now? The next morning, I walked into the bank and withdrew nearly every penny I had saved. The teller looked at me strangely as she handed me the envelope stuffed with cash, but I just smiled and told her it was for something important. When I handed that money to Lucas, my heart felt light. I imagined him building something great, something lasting, something that would prove all my sacrifices have been worth it. For a few days, I felt alive again. Lucas promised to call me with updates, to bring me in to see the business once it got going. I started to picture myself sitting at his new office, shaking hands with his partners, hearing him introduce me as the father who made it all possible. But the days turned into weeks, and the phone never rang. At first, I told myself he was just busy, new businesses were demanding. Then, after a month went by with no word, I called him. No answer. I left a message. I called again the next day. Still nothing. Eventually, he picked up. His tone was clipped, almost impatient. "Dad, I'm in a meeting. I'll call you later." He didn't call. A few weeks later, I heard from a neighbor that Lucas had been seen driving a brand new car around town. That night, I drove to the other side of town where I knew some of his friends lived, and there it was, parked outside a fancy new apartment building. I waited in my truck until I saw him come out. He was laughing with a group of people, dressed in designer clothes, looking every bit like someone who had made it. My heart sank. The next day, I went to see him. When he opened the door, his smile vanished. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "I just wanted to see how things were going," I said quietly. "You haven't called." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Dad, I told you I'm busy. Things are fine. Don't worry about it." "I'm not worried about it," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I just wanted to know what's happening with the money." That's when his expression changed. The warmth disappeared. "Look," he said, his tone suddenly cold. "It's my money now. You gave it to me. I don't owe you an update every 5 minutes." The words hit me like a punch. "I gave you that money because I trusted you," I said, my voice breaking. "And you still should," he snapped. "But if you can't, maybe you should just stay out of it." Stay out of it. I stood there in that hallway, feeling smaller than I ever had in my life. My son, the boy I had sacrificed everything for, was telling me to stay out of his life. When I got back home that night, the house felt colder than ever. The silence was deafening. I sat at the kitchen table for hours, staring at the empty envelope that once held my savings. That was the night I realized something had broken between us. This wasn't just about money. This was about respect, about love, about the bond that was supposed to hold a father and son together no matter what. And in that moment, I knew one thing for certain. If Lucas thought he could take everything from me and walk away without consequences, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. The days after that confrontation were some of the hardest of my life. Every morning, I woke up hoping that maybe Lucas would call, that maybe he had slept on it and realized how hurtful his words had been. But the phone stayed silent. The house felt different now, hollow, almost hostile. The photos of Lucas on the wall, the ones where he was smiling in his graduation gown or blowing out candles on his 6th birthday, seemed to mock me. I'd find myself staring at them for hours, wondering where I'd gone wrong. Nights were the worst. I'd sit at the kitchen table, the same one where I used to help Lucas with his homework, and just sit. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the house. I clutched my coffee cup until it went cold, my mind racing with memories and questions I didn't want to ask. How could he do this to me? Had I been a fool all along, thinking we were closer than we really were? My bank account was nearly empty. The savings I had built over a lifetime gone. The security I had counted on for my old age had vanished with one decision, one choice to trust the wrong person. I started avoiding people. I didn't want the neighbors to see me like this, didn't want to answer their questions about Lucas. It was easier to stay inside, to keep the curtains drawn, and let the world go on without me. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape the shame. When the power company sent me a warning notice, I felt my stomach twist. I'd never missed a payment in my life. Now, I was one late bill away from having the lights shut off. One night, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window. I almost didn't recognize the man staring back at me. His eyes were tired, his shoulders slumped, his face lined with something deeper than age, disappointment, heartbreak, maybe even anger. I tried to distract myself by working around the house, but even that brought no comfort. Fixing leaky faucets, patching peeling paint, it all felt meaningless. Then came the worst moment of all. I ran into an old friend at the hardware store. He asked casually, "How's Lucas doing these days?" I froze. "He's good," I lied, forcing a smile. The words felt like shards of glass in my throat. I hated lying, but I hated even more admitting that my son, the boy I had bragged about for years, had abandoned me. That night, as I sat in the dark, I felt something shift inside me. Grief had been my constant companion for weeks, but now it began to harden into something else, something sharper. I realized I had a choice. I could stay here, waiting for a call that might never come, letting my life slowly crumble around me. Or I could do something about it. Lucas had taken my savings, but he hadn't taken my mind, my skills, or my determination. I looked around my house, the one thing I still had left, and an idea formed. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't without risk, but it was something. I decided I would take out a reverse mortgage. The house had appreciated over the years, and the equity locked inside those walls could give me the breathing room I needed. It wasn't an easy decision. This house held decades of memories. Signing those papers felt like letting go of a piece of my past. But I reminded myself, this wasn't about giving up. This was about surviving. And maybe, just maybe, it was about teaching Lucas that I wasn't as helpless as he thought. When I walked out of the bank with that first payment in my account, I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in weeks: control. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for life to fix itself. I was going to rebuild one step at a time. And this time, I wouldn't be doing it for Lucas. I would be doing it for me. With that first payment from the reverse mortgage sitting safely in my account, I felt something shift. The weight on my chest eased just a little. For the first time in months, I wasn't staring into a financial black hole. But I knew this wasn't just about paying bills. Money might keep the lights on, but it wouldn't fix the ache inside me. So I made another decision, a harder one. I was done waiting for Lucas to come back. I was done living in limbo. If I was going to get through this, I needed to rebuild a life that didn't revolve around him. It started small. I cleaned the house from top to bottom, scrubbing years of dust and grief out of the corners. I took down some of the old photos, not out of anger, but because I needed to see the house as mine again, not just a museum of what used to be. Then I started going into town more. At first, I felt exposed, like everyone knew what had happened, like they were all whispering about me. But most people just smiled, said hello, and went about their day. The world hadn't ended, even if mine had felt like it had. One morning, I noticed an old building on the edge of town with a faded for lease sign in the window. It used to be a hardware store, but it had been sitting empty for years. Something about it caught my eye. That night, I lay awake thinking about it. What if I could turn that little building into something new? A small business of my own. I had skills, I had time, and now I had a bit of capital. It took weeks of paperwork, phone calls, and meetings with the bank, but eventually I signed the lease. When I opened the doors for the first time, the place smelled of dust and old wood, but I saw potential. I spent every day working on it, patching walls, painting, hauling in shelves and counters. My hands ached at night, but it was a good ache, the kind that came from creating something. The neighbors started noticing. "James, you opening a shop?" they asked as they passed by. I'd smile, nod, and tell them, just trying to keep busy. It wasn't long before the place came to life. I decided to sell gardening supplies, tools, and do small repair jobs for the locals, things I knew well and could manage on my own. Business started slow, but word spread. Soon, people were stopping by not just to buy things, but to talk, to catch up. For the first time since Lucas left, the house didn't feel like a prison anymore. But while my life was slowly finding a rhythm again, Lucas's was starting to unravel. I heard things, small whispers around town. Someone had seen him arguing outside a restaurant. Someone else said his business partners had pulled out of the deal. Then I heard he had sold that shiny new car. At first, I didn't believe it. Lucas had always been smooth, always landed on his feet. But one evening, I saw myself. He was sitting outside that same apartment building, head in his hands, looking nothing like the confident man I'd seen months earlier. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair unkempt. For a moment, my heart ached. This was still my son. No matter what he'd done, a part of me wanted to go to him, to put a hand on his shoulder and tell him everything would be okay. But I didn't. I drove past slowly, watching him through the rearview mirror until he was just a shadow in the distance. I wasn't ready to save him. Not yet. This was the part of the story where he needed to feel the weight of his choices, just as I had. And deep down, I knew the day was coming when he would show up at my door, asking for help. The question was, would I be ready? It was a gray, rainy afternoon when the knock came at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Business had been slow that day, and I was sitting by the fire with a cup of tea, listening to the sound of the rain against the windows. When I opened the door, my heart skipped a beat. Lucas stood there, drenched, shivering, and looking nothing like the man who had walked out of my life with my savings. His hair was matted from the rain, his clothes were soaked through, and his eyes looked haunted. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the rain pounding on the porch roof. "Dad," he said finally, his voice hoarse. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside without a word, watching him peel off his wet jacket and stand awkwardly in the hallway, dripping onto the floor. It was strange seeing him like this, vulnerable, broken. I didn't know where else to go, he admitted, his voice cracking. I gestured toward the table. "Sit." He did, his shoulders hunched like a man carrying the weight of the world. "I lost everything," he said, staring down at his hands. "The business fell apart. The investors pulled out. The apartment gone. I've been sleeping in my car the past 2 nights." I stayed silent, letting the words hang in the air. He glanced up at me, desperate. "Dad, I need help." I felt a storm raging inside me. This was the moment I had imagined for months. The day he would finally face me, admit what he'd done, ask for the help he had once so casually dismissed. Part of me wanted to shout, to demand answers, to ask him if he had any idea what those nights alone in this house had felt like. But instead, I took a slow breath and said quietly, "Help has a price." He blinked. "What?" I leaned forward, my voice steady. "You took everything I had without a thought. You left me here to fend for myself while you were out living it up. And now, you want me to just hand you more." "I was stupid," he said, his voice shaking. "I thought I knew what I was doing. I thought I could handle it. I didn't mean to hurt you." I studied him for a long moment. For the first time, I saw not the arrogant young man who had turned his back on me, but the boy I had raised, scared, ashamed, and desperate to make things right. "You can stay here," I said finally. "But if you do, you're going to work. Every day. In the shop. You're going to earn your keep. No handouts this time." His mouth opened like he was about to protest, but then he closed it and nodded slowly. "Okay," he whispered. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start. The next morning, Lucas showed up at the shop wearing an old work jacket I had loaned him. At first, he moved like a man half asleep, clumsy and distracted. But day by day, I saw a change. He started showing up early, asking questions about how to fix things, staying late to clean up. He learned to sweep the floors, organize the tools, handle customers. And slowly, without realizing it, we began to talk again. One night, as we closed up shop, Lucas leaned against the counter and said quietly, "I didn't just lose the business, Dad. I lost my friends. They cut me out when things went bad. I guess I wasn't as important to them as I thought." I nodded, letting him sit with the truth. "Funny thing about hard times," I said, "they show you who's really in your corner." He looked at me, and for the first time in a long time, there was no defiance in his eyes, just understanding. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling something in me settle. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about making Lucas suffer the way I had. This was about balance, about teaching him what it meant to stand back up after you'd fallen, to take responsibility, to build something with your own hands. And in that moment, I realized something else. I got my life back. Not because Lucas had returned, but because I had learned how to stand on my own without him. That was my revelation, that I was stronger than I ever knew, that betrayal had not destroyed me, but forced me to grow. And now it was time for Lucas to grow too. The first few weeks with Lucas back under my roof were tense. He slept in the small spare room, the one I used to keep boxes of old tools in. I could hear him tossing and turning at night, his guilt and restlessness keeping him awake. In the mornings, we barely spoke, just quick nods over coffee before heading to the shop. But as the days went by, the silence began to crack. One morning, as we were unloading a shipment of supplies, Lucas suddenly slammed a box down harder than he meant to. "This is pointless," he snapped. I looked up slowly. "What is all of this?" he said, throwing his arms out toward the shelves. "This little shop, this small life. I was supposed to be more than this. I was supposed to be successful." His voice broke on the last word, and for a moment, I saw the frustration that had been eating at him since he came back. I set the box I was holding down carefully. "And you think I wasn't supposed to be more than this? You think I didn't have dreams once? I worked my whole life to give you opportunities one never had, and you took that and threw it back in my face." Lucas flinched, but I wasn't finished. I didn't open this shop to prove anything to anyone. I opened it because I refused to sit in that empty house and wait for my life to be over. This place saved me. It gave me purpose. And now, it's giving you one too, whether you like it or not. For a long moment, Lucas just stood there, breathing hard, his jaw tight. Then his shoulders slumped, and he turned away. That night at dinner, he surprised me by speaking first. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. I put down my fork. "For what?" "For everything. For taking your money. For leaving. For acting like you didn't matter." The words hung heavy in the air. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he added. "But I needed you to know I regret it. Every bit of it." I didn't answer right away. My heart was pounding in my chest. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the moment I thought I wanted from the beginning. But instead of anger, I felt something softer rising in me. "Lucas," I said finally, "this isn't about forgiveness. It's about who you choose to be from this point forward. You can't change what happened, but you can decide what you're going to do now." He nodded slowly, and for the first time since he came back, I saw a spark of determination in his eyes. From that day forward, something shifted between us. Lucas started working harder, not because I told him to, but because he wanted to. He took initiative at the shop, handled deliveries, even started talking to customers with a friendliness I hadn't seen in years. But the real test came a week later. A man came into the store looking for a refund on something Lucas had sold him, a tool that had broken after only a few days. The customer was angry, loud, almost shouting. I started to step in, but Lucas held up a hand. "Sir," he said calmly, "I'm sorry that happened. We'll replace it free of charge and throw in an extra set of nails for the trouble." The man blinked, then nodded and left looking satisfied. When the door closed, Lucas turned to me. "I could have argued with him," he said. "Could have told him it wasn't my fault. But that wouldn't have solved anything." I felt a strange pride swell in my chest. He was learning. That night, as we closed up shop together, Lucas said quietly, "You know, I thought you were just punishing me by making me work here. But now I get it. This isn't punishment. This is rebuilding." I looked at him for a long moment and nodded. "You're starting to understand," I said. And for the first time in a long time, I believe he really was. It happened on a Friday evening, just as we were about to close the shop. A man stormed in, one of Lucas's former business partners. His face was red with anger, his voice sharp as he called Lucas's name. "You owe me money," he shouted. "You think you can just disappear and leave me holding the bag?" I stepped forward instinctively, but Lucas held up a hand. "It's okay, Dad," he said quietly. The man advanced, jabbing a finger at Lucas's chest. "You ruined everything. You convinced us all to invest more, told us it was a sure thing, and then you vanished when it fell apart. I lost my savings because of you." For a moment, I saw fear flash in Lucas's eyes, the same fear I had felt the night he left me with nothing. But then he did something I didn't expect. He squared his shoulders and said, "You're right." The man froze. "I made a lot of bad decisions," Lucas continued, his voice steady. "I was arrogant. I thought I was smarter than everyone else. And because of that, people like you and my father paid the price. I can't undo what happened, but I'm paying it back piece by piece, starting with him." He gestured toward me. The man looked confused, then angry again, but eventually he spat on the floor and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. For a long moment, there was silence. Then Lucas turned to me. "That used to be me," he said softly. Angry, blaming everyone else, refusing to take responsibility. "But I'm done running." His words hit me harder than any punch ever could. I felt my throat tighten as I stepped closer. "Lucas," I said, my voice low, "do you have any idea what it did to me when you left?" His eyes welled up. "I do now," he whispered. "I think about it every night. I picture you sitting in that house, waiting for a call that never came, and it makes me sick. If I could take it all back, I would." The dam inside me broke. "All I ever wanted was for you to be happy," I said, my voice cracking. "I worked myself to the bone, so you wouldn't have to. And when you took that money, it wasn't just cash you took my trust, my faith in everything I thought I taught you." Tears slid down his face as he stepped forward. "I know, and I'm sorry, Dad. Truly, I can't change what I did, but I swear I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn that trust back." I stared at him, my heart pounding. For months, I had imagined this moment, imagined what I'd say, imagined the anger I'd unleash. But standing there, looking at my son, broken, repentant, and trying to put himself back together, I realized anger wasn't what I felt anymore. What I felt was relief. Relief that he'd come back. Relief that he finally understood. Relief that maybe, just maybe, we could start over. I put a hand on his shoulder. "Then let's start with tomorrow," I said quietly. He nodded, tears streaming freely now. And for the first time since he had walked out of my life, I pulled him into an embrace. It wasn't forgiveness, not fully. That would take time, but it was a step. The next morning, Lucas showed up to work even earlier than usual. He didn't say much, but there was a new lightness to the way he moved, a quiet determination that hadn't been there before. As I watched him restock shelves and greet customers, I realized the climax of this story wasn't just about him changing. It was about me, too. I had spent months letting anger eat away at me, waiting for him to pay for what he had done. But now I understood I didn't need revenge. I needed peace. And for the first time in a long time, I felt it. The weeks that followed felt different, lighter, somehow. Lucas kept showing up every single morning, sometimes even before I did. He'd brew the coffee, unlock the shop, and have the floor swept before I could hang up my coat. And as we worked side by side, the silence that had once felt so heavy began to soften. Sometimes we talk about business, what to order next, which tools were selling best, how to bring in more customers. But other times we just talk about the past, about the good memories, fishing trips, late-night ice cream runs, the time we got caught in a thunderstorm and had to take shelter under a bridge, laughing so hard we could barely breathe. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments when anger bubbled up inside me. Memories of those lonely months, of the nights I went to bed with an empty wallet and an emptier heart. And there were times when Lucas would get quiet, staring off into the distance like he was reliving his own mistakes. But little by little, the bitterness began to fade. One Saturday, we were repairing an old workbench that a customer had brought in, and Lucas said quietly, "You know, I think I needed to lose everything." I raised an eyebrow. If I hadn't hit rock bottom, I don't think I ever would have learned, he admitted. I was so focused on looking successful that I didn't care who I hurt to get there, including you. Losing it all made me see how far off track I'd gone. I nodded slowly. Sometimes life teaches you the hard way. He smiled faintly. Yeah, but I think maybe it taught me just in time. That night, after Lucas had gone to bed, I sat by the fire and thought about how far we'd come. When this all started, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd been betrayed beyond repair, that nothing good could ever come from what had happened. But now I could see that this story wasn't just about loss. It was about rebuilding, about finding strength I didn't know I had. The money I lost hurt, there was no denying that. But the man I became in the process was stronger, wiser, and more at peace than I had been in years. And Lucas, for all his mistakes, had finally learned what I'd spent his whole life trying to teach him. That respect and responsibility matter more than quick success. That trust is something you earn, not something you demand. One evening, as we locked up the shop, he turned to me and said, "Dad, I know I still have a long way to go, but thank you for giving me a chance to make it right." I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in a long time, I saw not the boy who betrayed me, but the man he was becoming. "You earned that chance," I told him. "And if you keep doing what you're doing, you'll earn my trust back too." He nodded, and I could see the determination in his eyes. As I walked back to the house that night, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. The tables had turned, yes, but not in the way I had once imagined. I hadn't won by humiliating Lucas or getting revenge. I had won by refusing to let betrayal define me. I had taken back control of my life, rebuilt my future, and found a new purpose that didn't rely on anyone else. And in doing so, I had given my son the greatest gift I could offer him, the chance to learn, to grow, and to become better than he was before. In the end, it wasn't about the money. It wasn't even about the betrayal. It was about rediscovering who I was and helping Lucas discover who he could be. And that, I realized, was worth more than any savings account ever could be. If you've made it this far, I want to ask you something personal. Have you ever trusted someone so completely, only to have that trust shattered? Maybe it was a friend, a sibling, even your own child, someone you would have done anything for, who left you hurt, broken, and wondering if you'd ever recover. That's where I was, alone, empty, and convinced that everything I'd built over a lifetime had been taken from me in one cruel moment. But what I learned is that betrayal doesn't have to be the end of your story. It could be the beginning. When Lucas took my savings, he took more than money. He took my security, my peace of mind, and for a while, my will to keep going. But that pain became the very thing that pushed me to stand back up, to fight for my future, and to become stronger than I ever imagined. And when he finally came back, asking for help, I had a choice: stay bitter or use the moment to teach him what life had taught me. I chose growth. So, now I want to hear from you. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Would you have forgiven someone who betrayed you? Or would you have turned them away for good? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and I want to know your thoughts. And if this story spoke to you, if it reminded you of your own strength, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. I share stories like this every week. Stories about redemption, courage, and second chances. And I'd love for you to be part of this community. Because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is share our stories and remind each other that no matter how bad things get, we can rise again.